This article is exclusive clubs called DAOs are popping up online. What's it all about? I wouldn't even consider many of them exclusive clubs. They're more like inclusive clubs. They're done, so that's a good start. But yeah, Friends with Benefits is an interesting DAO. They've done really well at getting this kind of coverage because they are exclusive. They're invite only. And what they do is invite all the cool, they invite venture capitalists and techno DJs into their DAO, which is obviously an interesting mix because the VCs get to feel cool and the DJs and artists get the promise of riches and ultimate cultural membership. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on in this. I don't know, has anyone had any interaction with the FWB DAO and knows a bit more about it? Yeah, we're not cool enough. That's why. So yeah, so DAO is blah, blah, blah. Chat rooms such as Discord. Not everyone, so they do have their own currency. What was interesting about FWB, what I saw recently, they're playing with this membership token economics stuff. So I made a couple of membership token economics ideas years ago, and I do think it's going to be absolutely huge. So gating access to physical venues with NFTs. The guys who are doing our gating on the Tribes DAO Discord have also got a ticket thing. So you can have bouncers on doors. If you hold an NFT, you get in. And yeah, people were buying these NFTs at NFT NYC for 50 grand to get into the parties there. So it obviously works. And A16Z bought into this DAO. So yeah, have they come up with anything? So like most DAOs grants 1 vote per token instead of 1 vote per person, which is profoundly undemocratic. I wouldn't consider that profoundly undemocratic, to be honest. But yeah, if that's profoundly undemocratic, so is our democracy. The migraine-inducing difficulty in understanding the technological intricacies of a DAO. Can't really argue with that too much. It is. Yeah. So yeah, there's not much commentary or analysis in this. It just is what it is.
I was just saying he vaguely touches on the issue of 1 token, 1 vote. He doesn't really fully get in or define it, but he's signaling it as an issue.
Yeah, which is an issue we're trying to solve. Yeah. I mean, here capital is not used as a weapon, but the discussion is lively. So obviously inside of this DAO, there's discussions about racial bias and some of these contemporary hot topics. My next paper, I think the kind of interesting thing about this is because the first introduction to DAOs is Friends with Benefits, which is a exclusivity-driven DAO, that he's abstracted that to all DAOs and considers DAOs to be exclusive members clubs, which is one sub-brand of DAOs. So yeah, look, the people are starting to talk about DAOs more now in the mainstream press, which isn't a bad thing. But yeah, it just shows you how early and underdeveloped the narrative is there. So yeah, let's not dwell on The Guardian too much. That is better. What were you saying, Matt, about this? Yes, the fact it isn't a hit piece for The Guardian is really quite surprising. It's amazing. So yeah, and this is the thing. I think DAOs have this potential to cross the political lines in ways that cryptocurrencies on their own don't. So there's this kind of like narrative that crypto is this hyper-capitalist libertarian dreamland system, and DAOs have the potential to really shift that narrative into more, for want of a better word, socialist realms. And yeah, the fact that you've got like VCs talking about like essentially very communitarian concepts is interesting in itself. It's not that surprising to me that A16Z really hyper-exclusive DAOs are more than the kind of open, everyone gets listened to DAOs. But yeah, it just shows you that we're right at the very start of this narrative. DAOs are always going to be this thing that's it's the bottom of the rabbit hole for me, where the top is meme coins, dog money, buy Doge, speculate on the price, there's nothing else to it. And then you've got these kind of like narratives of inflation protecting hard money. You've got sort of Bitcoin next, and then you've got smart contract platforms, L1s, decentralized finance. And then somewhere close to the bottom of this rabbit hole, you've got DAOs. They're more complicated, but potentially more disruptive than all the other stuff put together. And what I consider these things are, for me, there is this kind of unification of like technology and people. And this is where it always has been. But weirdly, Bitcoin, for example, have led us down this kind of like governance minimization narrative, which is remove humans from the picture, trend towards automated software. And in many ways, like Bitcoin is almost part of the automation wave with AI and robotics and things like this, where it's just basically dehumanizing technology. So one of the affordances of technology generally is that it's dehumanizing, and Bitcoin certainly is one of them, whereas DAOs is much more on the other side of things, where we're almost reintegrating humans back into the picture. And that's what this article is about. If it's about technology and humans, then how do you create communities using them that are open enough and accessible enough to people to come and get involved? Yeah, this paper kind of picks up on, it's funny, this paper reminded me of some of the stuff that I used to do when I worked in learning and teaching. It touches on some of the same sort of ideas, and yeah, building a community in a educational institution, it largely borrows from the same sort of ideas that we've got in here, with some interesting twists. So this kind of idea, instead of being like, one of the key paradigms in DAOs is that it's not driven by top-down decision making. So, and this was talked about on the panel the other day. The chair was talking about like, why do CEOs tend to be psychopaths? And it's because there's this hard pyramid where you have to come up here and you have to like battle your way to the top. And the people that get to the top are the absolute lunatics who will beat everyone down around them in order to get there. And a sort of part of the value system of DAOs is that it's not that. And I saw some of the arguments happening on MakerDAO, which was like, we are perfectly flat, no hierarchy system, which of course isn't the case. But still, this is the attitude here, is that if you're not a pyramid, then you're more of a decentralized, ahierarchical, more like a community of practice, where all of these people are on the same sort of realm. Yeah, so there's a couple of interesting points in here, like this idea of grassroots is I think the strongest DAOs will have this kind of grassroots vibes. I think ones that essentially are owned by venture capitalists. So they own 30% of the supply, and it's a A16Z hanging around in there and all that sort of stuff. It's not going to feel grassroots. A few more interesting concepts here. Leadership. I've run entire master's courses on that concept alone. Leadership as an idea is an exceptionally big idea and super important for organizations. Ownership. Now, ownership has two connotations here. One is both financial ownership, but also psychological ownership. So psychological ownership is incredibly powerful, and it's something that I've certainly done research on in the past. And it's the idea that, so one of the things I did in the past was create university policy or institutional policy through crowd-produced means. We created university strategy based on 500 authors. All the people wrote it themselves, and I crowd iterated like 50,000 words of this is how I think we should do it into a single document. And the interesting outcome of it was that everyone who was involved in it, the policy felt more owned and was a lot more successful because of it. So if people feel like they're part of it, they have a much greater sense of ownership. And yeah, this kind of basically says not fostered through financial incentive design, but through community building, to be honest. I think my point here was that ownership is not fostered through financial incentive design, rather long-term focus on community building. I think it's both. I think in crypto world, if you're not building financial incentive design, you're pretty much knackered. But obviously this person's more community focused. So yeah, I got as far as this model, and it's got a bunch of things against each of these things. Attracting community participants. So this is the hardest thing to do, attracting community people. But yeah, have a look at this. Do you think there's anything that we haven't done on there? I circled the 2 things that we haven't overtly done yet. Yeah, it's standard PR. It's get the media to talk about you. Yeah, I would say we've still got some. It's like one of us saying before we must have gone quiet. So what's the talk of the town this week? It's Snoop DAO, which is another own Ponzi, which uses dog tokens as collateral. And everyone's, getting all excited about that. That's the news of the week. How do you, as an established, you're not launching a new shitcoin, you're an established product building stuff. How do you get the media exposed? How do you get noticed? But yeah, I think we've actually done a lot of this. We've got our DAO leaders stuff here. So we've got our DAO leaders. We certainly do a lot of community governance. Certainly got long-term token incentives built into us. We do community calls, working groups. I think we're doing everything. I think the one thing that we haven't done. So Ksenia, what's the channel we've got on the hackathon? We've been planning one for a long time.
We have a channel, yeah, but we haven't really put our minds together yet to create some executable plan.
Yeah.
Because it does sound a bit overwhelming to have a hackathon, but because it's a huge overhead if you do it properly.
Yeah, and I spoke to Kevin at Gitcoin. Last year, we talked about doing a hackathon with them. And it was at that point where just staying alive through your first year in crypto is hard enough. And overextending beyond what you are capable of is what kills you.
But also, I also view hackathons as it's pointless to have a hackathon unless we had our products ready. So I'm not completely bummed out we haven't done it yet, because otherwise it would be come to our hackathon and build our software with us, which is stupid. And now we have software, and it can be a bit like a social, like a DAO SDK in a way. So it doesn't have to be pure tech. So I think we're in time for a hackathon.
I think we're getting there, aren't we? I think we should give ourselves a nice long runway with it. Maybe March or something next year.
This is exactly what I said. If we have a long runway, but I don't want to convert this session into a hackathon planning meeting, because I would be really happy to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a good time to do it.
What I'm doing really is, once it's into the model, using it as a prompt for us to think about, are we doing this stuff? I think for the most part we are. Yes.
I wanted to come in here quick on the funnel. Yeah, on the image that you have there on the funnel. I guess I would say that each one of these items you do it. Your question was, have we done this, or are we doing this?
Yeah.
What I'd like to bring in is that you probably do each one of these things on a range from 0 to 10.
Yeah.
So you could probably. It might be a good question a good point to look into how much energy or how much effort or how much time are we putting into each one of these from 0 to 10? Yeah, because I think
it's a really good point, because you can put 1 into all of them, and you might get better if you put 10 into 2 of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a really good point, to the point where we should maybe create a kind of spreadsheet out of it and rank ourselves on it, be self-critical about how well we're doing this stuff. Do you know what we could do? We could stick all this in a influence vote and get the community to vote on what they think we should be doing.
Turning this into an influence vote is actually super interesting.
Yeah, because I think we could set up a vote pretty damn quickly, where these are the tags in it, and just get everyone to vote on it.
But would it be priorities or where we are already?
I think it's more interesting to see what the community want us to do, rather than appraise us so far, because there's quite a bit of asymmetry on the knowledge there. So plus differences in understanding. So branding, for example, we've just done a kind of rebrand of everything, and it's been slowly rolled out, but will be very evident once we've got the new website done, which is in creation at the moment. So you can see there's a bit of like asymmetry in knowledge between what the crowd know we're doing. So I think it'd be interesting to just say, what of this stuff do you think we should do? But yeah, let's do it. Let's do an influence vote. And then essentially what we'll then have is targets. You're right, we can't do 10 on everything. But what we can do is have an influence vote that gets the community to say, this is where we should weight our attention. And then we can self-assess ourselves against whether we're actually hitting that or not. So yeah, I like that idea. You still with me? I've not disappeared again. So this paper goes into a kind of bit of psychology / learning theory stuff. Learning theory 101. You've got a community of learners, call them, then just swap that out for network participants, that are between intrinsically motivated and extrinsically motivated. So intrinsic motivation is, I'm doing this because I want to, and it's way more valuable than extrinsically motivated, which is, I'm doing this because I have to. So, for example, when you're designing a learning community, and I think there's almost exact proxies to what we've got here. If an example in the learning community, is you do this because it's on the test. It's, do I have to learn this because is it on the exam? For us, this would be, what do I need to do to get the airdrop? I'm just purely doing it for token incentives. Whereas this is based on this kind of like, I'm doing it because I love the project and I want to be involved in something. And I think there's some implicit sort of tensions in this. Completely agree, this is where strong communities are formed. But you'll find a lot of the people in crypto are they're profit maximalists. They're almost like the people who've been around long enough, smart enough to like go, don't marry your bags. You don't get too into it. You're just here to make money. That's it. So I think this is the basics for weak communities. We've certainly seen that when the angry token flippers disappear because the token's going down this month. They just disappear. And then the people who've genuinely been around and are like, they're interested in what we're doing, they want to be part of the DAO wave, part of the ethos mission, so on, they stick around. So I think what we need is a kind of mixture of both, where we have a core of people that are going to be with us, rain or shine, bear market, bull market, whatever. And then we have this like growing and expanding group of extrinsically motivated people that come and go, and essentially this begins to grow. I would say like the conversion rate from this to this is like 1 in 100 or something at best.
Yeah, at best.
At best. Yeah. So I remember, can you remember all the marketing we did we picked up like 3,000 people in a Telegram group and we got like YZ out of it. Who was like super strong supporter.
Yeah, YZ is like a poster boy for finding someone in a trashy like crypto dungeon.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so we need to you need to do both. You need to go to the crypto gremlin / degen crowd because they bring the volume, they bring the attention, they buy the token to flip it. That can bring the volume, which attracts attention and is certainly, when it comes to this first bit, discover the community. Probably the top one on that is make the token go up, which isn't in that list.
But Ricardo actually mentioned the other at some community calls that there is also this process of discovering for people who are already a part of some community, like for instance, stoner cats. It might not be a giant amount of people, but it's this kind of cross-pollination. When you open a door to another community, then you might get supporters, and it doesn't necessarily means that you like stealing them from another community, but then this is how you can also form like stronger ties, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and this is an interesting point. Like attracts, the more intrinsically motivated people you've got hanging around, the more likely you are to find them. So I think that perhaps the hardest thing to do is build that initial core group, and then you can get this kind of snowball effect because you're like, oh, these people care about this and they're hanging around and getting involved and passionate about it. That makes it easier to find more intrinsically motivated people. I would say, if anything, we've probably pitched our marketing and branding a bit too much towards the intrinsically motivated people for a market that is exceptionally biased towards the other side. Yeah, which is kind of the opposite of what Peter Pan's saying here, which is the biggest mistake projects make here is overly focusing our marketing around monetary incentives, which is we haven't.
No, but we went with this kind of marketing to completely wrong crowds, I think. We went towards degens with the communitarian narrative.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because we really didn't promise them. Like, I remember doing this AMAs in like the dungeons.
Yeah.
And I was like, what am I talking about? These people just want to make 15 euros or some dollars or whatever maximum.
Yeah.
And it was just completely wrong narrative.
Yeah, that's true. We're going down into the crypto dungeons for people who want free money and pitching them next generation democratic technology and DAO infrastructure. Just wrong narratives to the wrong crowd. This is where I want us to go with the kind of, in response to that, our parliament idea is that we've got the free money crowd, the investors, we play all of them and then hone the marketing in for the right crowd. Like, the degens will tell us what they want, and as far as possible, we'll provide it. And the communitarians have their own dynamic. So I think we've got to build this kind of multi-threaded narrative and pitch it to the right communities.
Nick?
Yeah.
I just want to mention, there's something I felt I missed on this article, which is, this is what everybody's trying to do. Yeah, basically, there's competition there's a huge competition for communities. And I didn't really see this there anywhere.
Yeah, and I think from my understanding, this Peter Pan, the author of this, is heavily involved in Gitcoin. And this is written from the perspective who's built a community in Gitcoin.
Makes sense, makes sense. Yeah.
It does. They've already got the communitarian crowd. There's no other project in crypto who's done quite so well at the public goods. They run hackathons full time. So their Discord is full of the people who work on open source projects. It's very communitarian focused as is. So there's obviously this bias towards that. And they already have that sort of network effect. But yeah, absolutely. There's the crowd that we're competing with users across people like the Olympus DAO and their forks. And it's very hard to compete with a hard Ponzi-nomics DAO where everyone's just 100x'd. So yeah, it's hyper competition for communities, for sure. So this is an interesting point. What differentiates the community? I think we've got a lot that differentiates us, but we could do better at communicating it. Maybe that's a prompt for Thursday. What makes us different? What makes our community different? Minimum viable participation. So this is something we've spent quite a bit of time on. We've got layered amounts of participation. We've been talking in the future of work thing about creating this leveled system where one is just validate you're in the DAO, and then two is sign up for our Medium page or whatever. So I think we're doing that. And our jobs board has a range of tasks with levels of this. We've got the kind of spread the word task, which are very entry level. So again, I think we're doing that. We're just missing the network effect. So yeah, this idea around self-signaling is interesting. Self-signal their intentions. We could potentially do better on this, actually, prompt people to. So a big thing in DAOs is this thing about people having to step up and find their place. And rather than, because they're not workers in the conventional sense. It's not like most people just want to see that and keep an eye on it, be along for the ride. So you need this kind of like filtering mechanism of, hey, I want to contribute. I think we've got the what we need stuff with our jobs board. Is there anything we could do better on self-signaling, do you think? I like the term. I like that.
I think with the self-signaling, if you remember when we discussed the leveling up process, the gamification of Discord, part of that was the ability to self-signal, do I want to be a lurker, or do I want to be sort of
That was right. Yeah,
active participation? And then a few levels later, you then got to indicate, where do I see myself being a participant? Am I going to be someone that works in, analysis, or am I going to be someone who's a supporter and just going to spread the word as much as possible, or X or Y or Z? So
absolutely. So I think we're on that.
Yeah, we can build. We need to build a strong mechanic there, but that we've got a premise.
So we're almost extended this by almost self-categorization, almost. So we're doing that with the Parliament idea. Are you a degen or a galaxy brain? But also in these roles in the DAO. So role assignment. So I think we're onto the right track there. Maybe that's what we can talk about on Friday.
This lurker role reminded me of the story about the pig and the chicken opening a bar, and then they decide to serve the bacon and eggs. I don't know if you know the story. And then the chicken is involved and the pig is committed.
Yeah, that's a very good one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I was interested. I don't know if you saw the chap I was talking to from Temple DAO earlier. Had a really interesting point around commitment. So their opening ceremony thing involved people had to really commit in order to be able to gain access to the token, and it's proved exceptionally popular. Yeah, they give them a little augmented reality game, and you had to get to the higher levels before you could gain access, which we're doing bits of with Tribes DAO. But yeah, I think we're onto similar ideas around this leveling thing. But yeah, this stuff around relationship building, massively important. So there's definitely parallels to my old world. I'd sometimes have 1,000 students. They'd all know me because I'm Dr. Nick. There's one of me, but there's 1,000 of them. Right, so I can't possibly know everyone. Can't even remember all their names. It's physically impossible to remember more than 50 to 100 people's names. So there's always this asymmetry in the relationship potential. So mechanisms for better understanding people. It needs to not be me and 1,000 people. It needs to we need to create opportunities for people to get to know each other. And then I've seen quite a bit of evidence of this. I've been quite liked the fact that I see some of our community members that met in the FET Discord or the Telegram, sort of talking to each other on Twitter, or form their own groups and hang out with each other and talk to each other after the fact. We need to do that more, where we create a kind of private hub for people to talk and stuff. Any ideas how we can do more about that?
I think one of them we've really touched on, which is the language side of things. That's one hub, because I suppose there are going to be many types of hub, right? So it could be language. My dog's going nuts in the background.
A few things that come to mind here. This notion of belonging, that if you feel like you're welcome there, that place is, and it's linked to the ownership idea. Yeah, I feel like this is a place that I belong, where I'm welcome, where people want me here. Part of that is the internationalization thing. Oh, they're interested in my culture. They're making an effort to help me understand. That's a really important sort of notion in this. But I think we could do more this sharing bits of yourself. Certainly some of the pedagogical ideas that I've seen successful in the past are providing opportunities for people to share something about themselves. So for example, I saw someone in the English language course have their first lecture about their local dialect. And they would present words that were colloquialisms local from that area. And it allows them to talk about where they're from and their local area and stuff like that. And that being really good for making connections across the group. So interesting for ideas of how we can do some of that. How do we get people to do some sharing about themselves? And how do we build a sense of belonging? Yeah, Ricardo.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, please. Going to go into a different point.
I was just, what comes to mind is that there are probably several different ways of this is about engagement. Yes, a couple of ideas that come up. For example, having an introductions channel here on Discord. I don't know if I think this is not there yet, but this is something that works. People like to have give a brief intro of themselves, and they can read very quickly who are the other people on the channel.
Yeah.
Also, someone had mentioned before, I read somewhere, someone had suggested short bios about the team, the core team as well. Somewhere. Yeah. And I'm going to say something that I'm not sure how right this is or not, but my impression is that it's a very FVT, or the project has a very intellectual atmosphere overall. Yeah, there's a lot of research, a lot of deep discussion, which is interesting, and this is part of this is why I came. But I wonder if this is not impeding. Maybe there could be a bit more degen atmosphere somehow. I don't know how.
Yeah, I've reached the same conclusion many times, Ricardo. We've been a intellectual, sort of decentralized creative institution in a world of utter degeneracy. and I've noticed the tension or the different, but compared to academics, I'm a total degen. But compared to the crypto degens, I'm not. So there's definitely a mismatch between us. It's part of our missing product market fit, is that, right? Yeah, how we do it. There's a couple of things that potentially come back to that in a minute. The introduction channel, absolutely think this is a great idea, and we should seed it with a prompt. So tell us about XYZ. What would you like to be called? What are you here for? Some kind of prompt, little 3 bullet point response we can get out of people. And I think the team should be the first in that. So we'll get all the team to do it first, and then bring in the community members afterwards so people can go back and look through it. I think that's a really good idea.
I think what Chris has been doing in the Shibaku channel is fantastic. It's brilliant. I think if we could try to bring a bit of that maybe in a different tone or to finance.vote, it would be excellent, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Part of me thinks that part of the rationale for Tribes DAO and the Shibaku project was to bring the degen to our technology. And part of me just thinks we're going to be forcing it. If this is the place where we talk about deep tech, essentially. I'm not averse to the idea that FVT remains that to a certain degree. It's always a kind of quieter space that isn't as degen-y because it's where we get the work done. We've gone through the whole token flipping degen thing, and it's just a frenzy of noise and when marketing shouts. And it's depressing as hell, man. It's great when the token price is going up because everyone's like, "Wait, Dr. Nick's a genius. Everyone loves him, degen Jesus." And then when you're in the inevitable slump downwards for whatever reason, they're just begging you to pump the token. So maybe I think what we need is an inner circle, and this is part of the dynamic of the pyramid stuff. If we crack the layered levels things, then we can have a portion of the Discord that remains like this, where intellectual discussions happen, and then all this sort of gremlin frenzy can happen at the bottom.
This is a very interesting point. Then if you start thinking of the ecosystem, so it's not every product or every channel or every DAO that has to have this or that approach. Yeah, if you think of the ecosystem, then if the ecosystem works and somehow is growing, perfect. Yeah, so I see your point, and I agree.
Yeah, and so let's say we've got the FET DAO here, and Tribes DAO over here. We want an absolute frenzy of we're literally doing a dog token in it. We want the When Moon crowd in there. We're going to design little token games for them that just froth them into a frenzy. That's the kind of idea. And FET benefits at the economic layer from the activity in this, but remains separate, if you know what I mean, in terms of the crowd here. They're welcome to come in, of course. But when they get here, we're talking about crypto economics and technology and ethics and all this sort of stuff. And if they don't like it, they can go back here and flip dog coins.
I also think, like, from a slightly more like macro point of view, like when I first discovered finance.vote, there was a definite, I think that was the reason for our first conversation, actually, Nick. There was a definite sort of disconnect between like communicating what was going on at finance.vote to the community. And I think that's where I sort of, decided to try offer to help out and stuff. And I think weirdly, when you stumbled on that dApps for DAOs thing, that for me was like a real moment where it was like, I totally get what this is now. And I know we often in tweets and stuff refer to it as the Microsoft Office or the Adobe Suite, but for decentralized applications for DAOs. And that totally makes sense. And I think part of the issue for a lot of people in that sort of, because I was part of that mob back in Telegram when, it was always literally every other day, there was like 20 messages about when are we going to market, when are we going to go to YouTubers and stuff. And the problem really wasn't actually with us. The problem was we were so ahead of the curve in terms of DAOs. Like no one was talking about DAOs then. No, literally no. Even the most experienced crypto Twitters weren't mentioning DAOs and had no interest in it. And now what I think is we're going to find is we've had that time to absolutely nail on what we are, which is we're a DAO for DAOs, and we make all the apps that people need to spin up DAOs and maintain those DAOs. And now everyone's DAOs are really good. How do we start a DAO? And I think and again, this is totally down to you and the team and your vision for seeing it coming, is I think we've had that time to completely refine what our message is. And I think what will actually end up happening, the people we're talking about, the slightly more degen flavor of guest, will find us because their degen project will end up wanting to use our apps. And it's almost through the onboarding of our apps that they go, oh, these places. And I've seen it already, like we said, not like every time we, like Ksenia mentioned, every time we have an alliance with someone, their audience automatically trickles through because they like they like using the experience of using the apps, and they want. And I think when we start hitting up slightly more lower tier in the kindest possible way, then more degen NFT projects, which maybe don't have that sort of huge tokenomic side to it or the big sort of breadth of utility, I think we'll naturally assume all of those sort of people in that type of crowd.
Yeah, and I think we've had this slightly sort of longer game vision than the market certainly has. And this wasn't a 1 year project for me. I'm trying to build a lifetime's work here. And I think looking at these things on different timescales is not something that the market's particularly into. But yeah, I think you're right. We've had and it's been co-created. We've landed on our messaging, and I think this is certainly something that I'd like us to do more of this week. So on Thursday, I really like the idea of this session on Thursday where we get the community to start brainstorming around our branding. And it's actually one of the only things that we haven't done in this. And I think we have done a bit of it, actually. It talks about community branding and communications. And we've had our creative content stuff, but I'd like to get the community, and there's people out there doing this with us as well, who've started to really get into coming up with ways of explaining what we're doing to a wider group of people. They're the people more linked into those communities. I don't have time to spend loads of hours in degen discords and stuff like that. So the people who know the right messaging and will know the right trigger points for those communities are the people who are in them. So I think we just need to provide the right materials to people. Let's give them the fonts and the branding packs and minimal direction, and let people just come up with their own content and run with it.
Nick, I wanted to mention something else here. I'm not sure if it makes sense. Yeah, it might be complete crap what I'm going to say, but I'm wondering from this communication or from this communication perspective, another possibility, another thing that could be done maybe is to try to approach the way other, say, large-scale projects are communicating the fact that they have tools for DAOs. Have you considered? Again, I'm very new to the project. Have you considered, or have you thought about, discussed the idea of marketing this as a launchpad, as a DAO launchpad?
Yes, we have. Yeah, it is in my mind. But the problem is that the launchpad thing got so grimy and nasty last year. And if I was a regulator, put it that way, where would I be looking? The launch pads, because that's potentially, if you can say, okay, these guys are all issuing illegal securities. Now, this is why Binance have even stopped doing launchpad stuff. Remember they had Binance Launchpad? They barely ever do anything on Binance Launchpad anymore. CoinList are a launch pad, and they only launch properly decentralized L1s now. If you look back at their stuff, launching tokens is risky business, but our products are way more decentralized, and we're just the software providers. We are not enabling, we're not vouching for or responsible for anyone that uses them. And this is what I see the third phase of the project being, where there is nothing I can do to stop anyone launching using auction, bank, yield, influence, and whatever other dApps we've got ready. And that's the point where I can say we're a launchpad, when it's decentralized. And I think we can start doing that once we've incubated some projects. And so, for example, the one like Tribes DAO, we're going to launch that project, and I'm comfortable with it's a good project because it's ours. And then the same will be true of potentially another few DAOs that we launch next year. But it's when it's like us launching new projects, I get a bit nervous about it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. When I say launchpad, it doesn't necessarily have to be this word or even the exact same format as launchpad. But basically communicating this as a way, okay, you can do everything you need here and start like this, and it's easy, get it done now.
Yes. Yeah, where it ends up. So I imagine our third phase of the sort of mental picture I've had in mind is these kind of like a spaceport where you build spaceships in it and launch them from it. That's why a third phase of the network's called Starship. Very much where I see this going, truly decentralized DAO launchpad that isn't, so like Aragon, for example, is like everything's in one smart contract. You know, launch a DAO, it's just like deploy the smart contract. Whereas with this much more complex, almost like bespoke like architecture. And what I imagine eventually is that if we crack this community thing, we can have a huge crew of people who get to work launching DAOs. So there might be a crew of people who come and literally go and community manage a DAO that's launched for 6 months. And we match make them with the DAO. We help them. We've got people who help them design their DAO, do their DAO, design their token economics, launch their community, get everything up and ground, get them sustainable. And then once they've done that, they can come back to us and do another DAO, or even do 3 DAOs at once. So this like community piece is exceptionally important for us because, I want people to be able to feel confident that they could essentially work for this DAO full time, launching DAOs for a living.
Okay. So something else that came to me going back to the paper, to the article, is the type of, so what my impression is that what you need to do and what you can do and the type of people that join your community is I guess it's totally related to at what stage of the roadmap the project is at.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what you're telling,
No, you're absolutely spot on. It's this, and I think this final bit gets on this a little bit. But yeah, there's community becomes more important. So if you think of a DAO life cycle, it starts very centralized. And for me, let's say there's me here and I've had an idea. I've come up with something. Now, essentially what I then went to do is recruit Naomi and Yuvi to help me get it off the ground. And essentially that is a process of decentralization, going from one person holding a key to an M of N multisig, two of three multisig, is a decentralization process. But then it keeps going on. And essentially there is this process where you need to build enough tech. Let's say you start with a community, you start with a group of developers, and now you have some technologies that are deployed to mainnet, and it requires more users and more expansion of the sort of tool set, and so on. So community is how you decentralize, because this is how you get the next sort of layer of people, and so on. So there's this logarithmic growth of people that's required, and as that happens, the more people you've got involved in the creation of it, the more decentralized you become. So communities are the means of decentralization. So yeah, it's exceptionally important work, and you'll find projects who just aren't concentrating on it, and it's perhaps because they want to remain centralized. If for me, you've got a team that builds all the tech, and there's like a walled garden between them and the community. There's like essentially a Berlin Wall here, and occasionally they give them some dev updates or whatever. If they're not trying to recruit community into the team, and essentially these kind of things just essentially merge, team is community. If you're not planning to do that, you have no desire to be a decentralized network, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I think perhaps there will be a point where perhaps regulators or someone says, is this network decentralized? And for me, this would be the route into discovering that. How much of the content, how much of the network is produced by the community? Is there an identifiable team? What's the boundary between the team and community? And what processes do they have in place for recruiting from the community and all that sort of stuff? I don't know, does anyone agree with me on that? Thoughts?
Yep, fully agree.
So yeah, and I think the kind of route into that is, I'm going to write a piece like this myself. Hopefully at some point in the near future, I just get time to be able to just finish all the writing off that I've got backed up. But there's some things that I think are potentially the continuation of this narrative. And it's the kind of relationship between token economics and community. I think there's some things in here that... So this person basically says ownership is... The important ownership is the psychological ownership, the feeling of ownership, rather than financial incentives. I think that there's a crossover here on incentive design, which I think we're cracking some of with bank and our vote mining stuff. I think there's an important notion of social consensus and using voting technologies to close the feedback loop. I think there's the notion of this kind of... There's an implicit power structure that's not talked about in this, which is they're talking about community as though it's separate from the project. So what's team and community as a power dynamic is an interesting thing to get into. I think there's this thing I just finished talking about, this notion of community and decentralization. There's this idea of the exit to community, where I think the only people who've managed to pull this off, or the only person who's managed to pull this off, is Andre Cronje with but where that ends in that, and what the models are for that. I think gamification is another one. Plurality. This whole thing around something for the degens is important. So again, this article's very much, don't worry about the degens, focus on the communitarians, which is what we've done. And I think, again, that's the Gitcoin bias in this. But you need to have something for everyone in this market, I think. And it might be the case where it's degen frenzy time in a bull market, and then it's communitarians and galaxy brains in a bear market. So if you can imagine a 18-month bear market happens, let's hope it doesn't. But if it does, we want to be ready to come out, and you're ready for keep the degens happy on the way out. So yeah, where community, I think there's the whole dimension around governance and access to it. Interesting stuff. I spoke to a lawyer from Stanford last night about some of this stuff. They're thinking about doing a course on decentralized governance. And yeah, not many people know. I think she asked me a few questions around who's doing this right so far. And I said, no one. Everyone's doing bits of it and lots of it wrong. And I think it's just very early and very new at the moment. But yeah, I think, what did you think of that? Was that useful? Talk about this stuff. Is there any takeaways we want to take into Thursday?
Yeah, I think that was really good.
So that's give me some stuff to reflect on, actually. I think we need, on Thursday, what I'd really like to do Let's get the community sharing as much ideas as possible for how better to communicate finance.vote to a wider group. I think we can do that vote we talked about, which is let's convert that funnel for community building into a vote and let people vote on it. Do people want hackathons? I don't know. Do they want more community governance? Do we think we should do more bounties, outreach, events, and so on? But yeah, it's like a community-driven branding session. I'm starting to see Thursday as. So we need to do whatever's necessary to get people warmed up about that.
Nick, I have a question here.
Yeah.
Are there from these let's say public calls that we have on our radio and stages, is a process already in place to transform? Because while you've been talking, you mentioned several things that would really have a positive effect if they were really implemented, done simple to more complex things. Is there a process in place now to transform this into action points and who does what, etc.? Is this happening already or not yet?
I think we've got a little bit closer in the sense we've now got this stream of content that's recorded. It hits our YouTube channels. We've talked about, I think Matt's been experimenting with turning it into text and things like that. Apparently I say the words at 350 times an hour, which is great, at least. So I'm going to work on that. But yeah, I think we need to get better at converting that to coherent actions. So that's the next step.
Okay.
So maybe if we just simply prompt people to, if they're here or if they're listening to it at the end, to propose actions. I've noticed people are already doing this. So there's like people saying, hey, we should get listed on DeepDAO. There's a million of these listing sites that I don't have time to do a lot of them. I know the community managed to get our price feeds fixed on Delta or whatever. Maybe we should set up a actions channel or something for this kind of stuff. Yeah. We need a decentralized to-do list.